Hey there, CEOs. I'm so excited for today's guests because she is one of my favorite people on the planet, one of my besties. And I'm so excited to share Michelle with everyone on the pod. So, welcome, Michelle. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here.
Well, you and I have gotten to know each other really well over the last few years. So, I want everybody to get a little bit of a glimpse into why I think you're one of the most magical people in my life. But to get started, you're such a multifaceted person. Like, you have so many different iterations in your career path and so many different interests and so many different hobbies. I'm curious for you to start by sharing, how have you brought all of these things together, like your work in branding, your work as a community builder, you being a witchy woman? How have you brought all of these things together to create the business that you have now? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that everything that I do comes back to two things. Number one, who we are, and then number two, how we relate to one another. So I think a lot of the work that I do is, classified as identity work. Who are you? What drives you? What are your values? What is it that you are really great at? And what is it that you put out into the world? And then also, how does that help other people? So I think, I have a history of working in corporate. I have done my own thing. I have been a teacher. I've, done the witchy things, like you said, everything from tarot to retreats to really hosting mindful events for people who identify as evolving, right? People who are in transition, people who are looking to not necessarily level up, but maybe change their direction. People who are moving from one way of being into another. And so I do have that a broad background. I have a background in communications, I have a background in education, human resources. But really, when I think about it, at the crux of everything, I think about who we are and then how we relate. So that's how it all interconnects. No matter what I do, I come back to those two foundational things.
And I think this is something that a lot of people need to hear because I feel like, especially as small business owners and entrepreneurs, we're told very early on, like, the only way to make a business is to find a niche and, yeah, exactly. And create this very narrow definition of like who you are and what your work is about. But you've gone so against that traditional advice. And what's been interesting is the people that you attract naturally attract just as you move through the world all have the value of growth, but it's not necessarily growth as related to like revenue growth. You know what I mean? Like, this is something that I really love about being in your world is it's this growth in more of a curiosity and wanting to be more aligned and wanting to be more yourself. Maybe the revenue growth comes along with it. Maybe there's growth in other areas. And I think that's such an amazing space to be in with people who value that type of growth. Just because it's deeper, it's more interesting, it's more human in a lot of ways.
I think we're taught that growth is an external pursuit, and a lot of the time it is an internal one. We are taught that, like, oh, we've achieved this. Now go here. Now go here. Now, like, we think of growth as a trajectory as up as opposed to around. And when I look at this, it's not that revenue can't grow with it. It's not that your team can't grow. It's not that you aren't gaining different perspectives or evolving. It's truly not somebody else's ladder. I think that's what it really is. Growth is bigger than a ladder, right? It goes up, it goes down, it goes all around. I often think of it as a
Yeah.
spiral, right? Sometimes we come back to, we feel at the exact, that we're at the exact same point that we were before. And a lot of people describe that as going backward, or I've taken a step back, or I, have fallen back into old habits. And I think that's not true. I think that when we look at this, especially as entrepreneurs, as people who are building businesses, we don't ever go back. We do go forward, right? Like,
Yeah.
time time isn't real, first of all, and second of all, time isn't necessarily as linear as we like it to believe. And yet we are bound by a calendar, we're bound by years, we're bound by the finitude of living, right? So I think we do go forward no matter what. But I mean, maybe not. Maybe there's other parts of that that we don't yet understand. So I know that's a little more esoteric and a little bit more out there when I'm thinking about it, but
Yeah.
how does that relate to building a business? You build a business because you are constantly curious. You can realign. I mean, when you were giving your description, you basically listed like some of my very top values, right? Align to who you are, lead from there,
Yeah.
don't do stuff you hate, right? Don't constantly feel like you have to be somewhere else. And then look at your own trajectory and what it is that your gifts align to, and then go do those things.
I think it takes so much courage for a lot of us to do that though, because we are all raised in this culture where we all want to belong, right? And in belonging and trying to fit in, we kind of smooth out the edges, right? We
Mhm.
stop being so ourselves and we try to fit in by being more like everybody else. But as a small business owner, that's one of the most dangerous things you can do because it makes you just like everybody else, which means you don't stand out at all. And learning to embrace that you do need to kind of embrace your edges, even when they're uncomfortable. Or you feel like I'm the only one doing it like this, or I don't see anybody else who's doing it the way I think I want to do it. That really rattles some people. And I know that now you are exploring more work with folks who maybe aren't just small business owners, but are also in, the corporate world or in the nonprofit world. They're in these pivotal moments in their life where they're trying to come back to what is authentic for them. How do you help people right now step into that when they've got probably 40, 50 plus years of conditioning they're now trying to fight against that has told them, check all the boxes, do it the right way, put your head down and this is how we get to here. How are you helping people really embrace their authenticity now?
Interestingly enough, I am prepping for a conference talk that I'm giving tomorrow. And, I know that, but this is still evergreen information, right? So I just finished doing a bunch of research. I know you and I kind of geek out on like really going into the science behind things and like the history and all of that. So I was doing some work on, kind of the neuroplasticity of our brains and
Mhm.
also how we are conditioned to talk about like how we return to ourselves and find our authentic voice and why we suppress it and why all of those. And I know this is not exactly what you asked me, but I feel like it's very related. Um, why we say the things we say, why we do the things that we do over and over and over again. And, this also goes back to niching, right? When we think about our businesses and we're like, oh, we only serve this one tiny little piece, or we only do, these services. And really, we're more whole people. So all of the work that I've ever done, whether it's with agencies and small businesses, or whether it's people and personal branding, or whether it's one on one coaching, or whether I'm giving a tarot reading, or whether I'm doing human design work, or I'm leading a workshop, or even if I'm teaching like in, massive Fortune 100 companies on how to connect authentically and how we belong, which is fundamentally what it is that we want, right?
Yeah.
It's in our DNA. We want to belong. And yet, in order to belong, we have been taught that we have to go against all of the things that we think, feel, do, believe in order to fit in, because that group dynamic, that group conditioning, that group speak, that group think is a real thing when it comes to belonging. So, how do you break up with that? How do you actually move out of what it means to kind of sacrifice your own authentic voice in order to belong? Those things don't feel like they actually have to be that far apart. And yet, oftentimes, when I work with my clients, like I said, even if it's like big companies or individuals, we see these two things as completely opposite. How can I be authentic and still fit in my, Fortune 100 company? How can I be authentic and still make money and sell to people in my own business? Right.
Yeah.
And then the other question, like flipping that completely around, how can you not? Right. When you are in this place, it is scary because speaking up, understanding where your voice comes from, understanding the things that you value, believe in, your stance, your convictions, your own wisdom, right? You are actually really uniquely you, and no one else is you. Now, we have a lot of things that connect us as humans. And so we think of ourselves as different, but there's a lot of things that we can root into that sameness. So your question was along the lines of how do you unlearn, and how do I teach how to like unlearn some of that conditioning so that you can either stand out or use your voice in corporate, or do or maybe not even in corporate, right? Use your voice in your business. How to use your voice in your own household, right? And your own family
Yeah.
and with the people who have, packed on all of this stuff on top of you. Your voice isn't your voice. Your voice is formed by everybody around you, your culture, your norms, your biases, everything, right? It's it's a practice. It isn't
Yeah.
an activity and it isn't a destination. It's truly like, how do you get into the things you say, the things you believe, the things you do, and start to practice putting that out there. So there's a lot of different methodologies in order to do that. Number one is defining it. I mean, the
Yeah.
simplest thing is like defining, what do you value? What do you value right now? What do you even care about? Why are you here?
Which
You know,
sounds like it's the simplest thing, but it's the hardest thing too,
yeah,
right? And I think a lot of times, um, if we don't explore that, if we don't take time to explore that, that's where we find people who, are now more than halfway through their career or more than, 10, 20 years into their business. And they're like, is this it? Is this what I've been working
yeah,
so hard for? Is this what I've been building? Is this what I really want? This isn't what I thought it would look like. And they start to have those, questions about, did I do the right thing? Did I go in the right direction? And it does take a lot of deep, like, excavation into your values. And, we talk here about values all the time because they're so
you do.
important. But I think
Mhm.
you can't talk about it enough because so often it's like just pick 5 words off of a list of values. And it's like, no, no, no.
No,
What
that's not
actually
values.
really matters to you? And I think a lot of people are sometimes scared to say that. I love seeing more people being more bold in saying what they stand for, even if it is something they feel like might be controversial. But saying what you stand for doesn't always have to be controversial. It could be, little things.
Yeah.
It
It's
doesn't have
also
to be hard.
personal things.
Yeah.
I think when we think about values as like we're choosing them from a list, right? I just did something for an entire group of like financial executives and accountants and people in that world. And I guarantee you almost all of them had like this value of integrity, transparency. Those
Yeah.
words though meant different things to different people.
Yeah.
And it's not just one word. You have to know, like, what's behind that word for me? One woman, I remember talking to her, she was talking about how, like, when her, what that meant to her, the value of transparency is it actually stemmed from something that happened with her parents' business when she was a child, right? And how her parents were cheated, and now what that looks like is in her work, why she does the thing that she does is really
Mhm.
because she wants people to know transparently what their business looks like behind the scenes so that other people can't pull the wool over their eyes, right? And then somebody else who used that same value of transparency, what it meant for them was a completely different story. It was more along the lines of why knowing all of the things about your own business could help you set your goals for the future, right? So same word, really
Yeah.
different story behind it. And I think that when we think about the stories that shape us and the stances and the convictions that we have, that is where the uniqueness comes in. That's where the niching comes in. When you're telling those types of stories, and that's how you get to authentic voice and not just using the word that somebody else wants you to use. And I think when we think about these words, we are trying to cultivate a sense of belonging. Like Rachel believes in transparency, so does Michelle, right? Or Rachel believes in, doing values work, so does Michelle. But why?
Yeah.
What's the why behind that? What?
I love that. And I think we could talk about this so long because it
For
is such an
days.
important conversation. And again, this is like the deep work
Yeah.
that a lot of people gloss over until there's that kind of crisis of confidence or consciousness or whatever that makes them really question why they're doing what they're doing and if they are on the right track.
This
But
is the work that I know you want to
Yeah.
shift, but just really quick, this is the
Yeah.
work that you do, but also, and the work that I do in different ways. When
Yeah.
you're working with your business owners, I know people come to you and they're like, oh, I've got my list. I got my list of things to do. That is
Yeah.
my list of things to do, by the way. But I think that the list of things to do has to be informed by the list of things to be and how you currently and who you currently are and where it is that you want to be headed. I think that that's the difference is, I've told this story many times on different podcasts. You are probably going to die with a to-do list. I keep my mom's to-do list. She died with a to-do list. My aunt died with a to-do list. But if you are just constantly hustling to that next to-do or like, I've got to get this done. I've got to get that done. You're going to miss your full life. You're going to miss your life. You're going to miss your business. You're going to miss all of the joys because you didn't actually take that step back to be like, oh, do I actually care about this and why?
Exactly. And that leads to businesses that just the people running them are so disconnected. And then they become disconnected from the humans working with them or the humans
Right.
hiring them. And it just snowballs into all these other challenges. So, doing this deep work, I know we've heard a million times that entrepreneurship is a great personal development journey. It can be the personal development journey if you're willing to really dig into the identity work and really dig into what matters to you and your values. It's so incredibly powerful too, because I think what happens and what I see with you especially, even though you have all of these different aspects of yourself, right? You have all these different parts of yourself. You're not into a tiny little niche. I think you have been such an amazing role model for me of somebody who just shows up as yourself everywhere you go. And you continue to like find people. I can't walk into a room or a restaurant or anything with Michelle without her meeting at least one or two people she knows. And they know her all from completely different stuff. Like some of them might know you from your business, some of them might know you from Creative Mornings, some of them know you because they met you at a boxing class. Like, share a little bit about that because I feel like you are one of those magnetic people who just shows up and lives your life, but you keep building these communities of people around you.
I think that the most interesting and hardest work I've ever had to do in my life is integrate all those personalities. And this is why I think that we do go places and always, and Kevin says, my husband says the exact same thing. He's like, can you not know somebody? He's always excited to go someplace new, but we'll know somebody soon enough. Don't worry, honey. Um, but it's because I think for so long, and this, take what you will with marketing and branding on this too, where I thought I had to be different personas based on where I was,
Yeah.
right? So, like, give me your avatar, give me your persona, right? This is what drives me absolutely insane about marketing. And probably why I did branding for so long, and I still do it too. But a lot of that work is the integration work. Like, who are you talking to? Niching to those values instead of the things that you do or what you want people to know about you. Okay, sorry, that's a different tangent. But coming back to your question about taking that and really building community, community can be built off of a goal, right? And an idea. And it's like, hey, so creative mornings. Oh, I value creativity. So I'm going to go to creative mornings and I'm going to show up there. But what else do you value? What are some of those things that really drive who you are? Human connection, being with people face to face, really being present for them. Those are all values that I have. And that's why I have a lot of these communities. And, some of those basic human things,
Mhm.
we want to belong, right? That was what we talked about already. It's in our
Yeah.
DNA. We want to connect. We want to be seen, held, loved, heard. We want to do good things in the world for others, right? All of those communities have that under thread, right? So whether, you're meeting somebody that I know from one place or another, it's never the action or if you're in business, the service, that's the thing. It's the transformational stuff that's underneath. It's
Yeah.
the things, it's the heart that drives it, it's the love that drives it, it's, that connection piece that drives it. And so all of those communities, whether they're different, but the undercurrent is the same.
Well, and what I think I heard you start to go into a little bit is I feel like in business, again, a lot of us in creating that ideal customer avatar, we also start creating this like character that we play when we are out in the world as business owners. And it's so inauthentic and people
Mhm.
can feel it. I think
Yep.
this is the big thing, like, you you can feel it online, but you could definitely feel it in person, and I know I'm not the only one who has met somebody who I had connected with or met online and then met them in person. I was like, "Whoa,
What happened? Right.
what happened? Like, what costume were you wearing online that suddenly the mask came off here and you're just completely different?" And I think that's something I really admire about you is because when you and I first really got to know each other, it was like I was drawn to you as a person because I was like, this is just an interesting person. I loved
Same.
how multifaceted you were and how many interests you had and how many things you were involved in. And I think that's what I want more entrepreneurs to lean into is you don't have to create a character of yourself or a caricature of yourself. And you don't have to give up all the aspects of yourself to fit this like little box just because somebody told you that's how you
Right.
do marketing or show up, in your business as the face of your business. Actually, I think the more little quirks and nuances and things that you share
Yeah.
with us make you more interesting, which makes you more appealing to people.
I Every single client I have worked with has told me that the content that I've written for them is what they came for, but what they actually left with is they didn't expect to have kind of their own personal reckoning and their own transition and realize that they really had to look inside themselves and kind of grow as a
Yeah.
human um, through brand work, right? And I think that there's whether, it's with branding, like I said before, or it's truly this coaching, it's when you realize that this person that I am might not be exactly who I'm becoming. And that liminal space and that gap, this is something that I'm doing a lot of research on right now, that space of how we transform as humans, because we are all taught to do certain things. And that's how we actually function. I mean, this is why we grow. If you look at the stages of development, if you look at childhood, you look at why teenagers try on all these identities, and then we pick one, and in my own personal life, I picked one, right? And I had other interests and stuff, but I was like, when I'm this person, I can't be this person. I will never forget a client telling me, leaving their very first session with me and saying, "Oh, now I've got to put on my professional shoes and go to work." And I was like, let's at the end of this process, the shoes are the shoes. You are you.
Yeah.
There's no other you that is going to show up. So when you are looking to finally get to that point where you don't have to put on a mask or you don't have to play a character or a part or a persona anymore, and you can authentically be who you are, then
Yeah.
that's something completely different. And I talk about this when I teach classes too, because I inevitably get the question, well, I can't just tell everybody everything. There's a difference between private information and then personal information and public information. And you want to be in that personal and public persona, yes, but as that person, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to be playing a role. You want to be the real you, not the role you.
And it takes practice. And I think it takes a lot of healing. And it also takes, in a lot of ways, I feel like the more I surround myself with communities of folks who are also on this journey and are willing to rumble with the vulnerability of showing up as yourself. And not all communities are that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places in the world, whether it's businesses or organizations or any place you walk into where there's other humans, there's a lot where you armor up, right? With the role that or
Right.
the character you were going to play to keep yourself safe. But
Yeah.
as small business owners, again, like I feel like the more that we wear that mask all the time, the more we're actually harming ourselves long term because we're going to get to the
And
point where we're just
others.
done. Yeah.
And others. We can't really, how can you expect others to transform if you aren't in that vulnerable space
Yeah.
as well? And it doesn't mean that you're processing everything on everybody. That's
Correct.
totally different, right? That is a very different, way to look at everything. You don't have to do your process in public. However, you do need to be real. And that's very uncomfortable. And, we are made to kind of shy away from that discomfort because that is what keeps us safe.
Yeah.
That is an evolutionary thing that we humans have. And yet, the more we lean into that, the more our comfort grows. And that's what growth really looks like in the end.
Absolutely. I want to talk about community building with you, especially because you're coming up on 5 years of being the host for Creative Mornings RVA in Richmond, Virginia. Um, and you are stepping down from that role as the host.
I am.
But in the last 5 years, I feel like watching this community evolve and change and grow has been one of the most incredible things. And one of the things you shared when you announced that you were stepping down as host was the greatest compliment people have shared is that now this community looks like Richmond. It looks like the city we live in. And I feel like that is such an achievement simply because we are in a very diverse city where there have been a lot of silos and self protection and not a diverse group of people coming together over shared values as often. Can you share a little bit about how you approached making this community more authentic and more of a real picture of the creatives who are in this city across all the spectrums here?
Yeah, I think that there's only so much growth that can happen in our own small siloed circles, right?
Yeah.
So, how did it occur? Well, first of all, it's not just me that did it, right? We have
Yeah.
an amazing team that, is part of that. I have what I call Lindsay, who I call my co-conspirator. And but one of the very first things that I noticed when I first went to Creative Mornings is it was this kind of niched creativity. And our manifesto was more along the lines of everyone is creative and everyone is welcome. And I'm like, I'm looking around the room and I don't see everyone.
Yeah.
I do not see different, there were some different races, but it was not diverse. I don't see different career paths. I don't see different ages. I don't see different learning, modalities, right? I see a lot of same, although everybody is different and unique. And so I think the very first thing was like, what does our city even look like? And taking a look at that. And you can apply this to your businesses as well and to life in general. If you're evolving as a person, right? Take a look at your 10 closest friends. What do they look like? Are they the same as you? Are they different? Right? Start asking those types of questions and doing that when you say building communities, right? Whether you're building a community, a personal community or a professional community, what do you want your demographic to look like? And I hate using that word, but like it's a common word to talk about,
Mhm.
the different psychographics, social graphic, like all of the graphics, right? The demographic of your audience. And if it doesn't look like the people that are part of that larger community, then Should it? And if so, that takes concerted effort. And that is not just like showing up and, especially in kind of the creative mornings or, I've seen this in education as well. When I worked in education, it doesn't mean like you have to go in and be, the whole idea of white saviorism and going in and really like saying, hey, I've got the answer for you. But start talking to people. What is it that you really want? What is it that you really need? What is it that you'd like to see us build? And that doesn't mean that you're always doing consensus building to the point of changing your own trajectory. But when
Mhm.
you're thinking about community and community goals and how to continue to add to that, you've got to start with the basics of who's around me. Does that audience look like where we're headed in this shared pursuit? And if
Mhm.
not, where are those people and do they want to come? And what am I offering? And also what is it that they need?
Yeah.
I think going back to those basics is where you start with that.
Yeah, and you have navigated this over the last 5 years, especially the reckoning in 2020 with Black Lives Matter in a city that has a huge Black population. It has
Mhm.
been really amazing because I feel like we've seen this conversation about diversity and embracing diversity and trying to build diverse communities kind of fade away with the current administration, but a lot of the amazing things that come out of that are the collaborative opportunities or the new businesses that are created or the new ways that we're supporting each other. And I think one of the things I really love about watching you and the whole Creative Mornings team is your willingness to just go out there and meet people wherever they're at, not waiting at the door for them to walk through the door, but instead going to
Yeah.
meet them where they're at and inviting them in.
And maybe they don't want to be invited in, and that's fine
Maybe
too.
they don't want
That
to. Yeah.
means that we're still going. And that's the
Yeah.
other piece, right? I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of, and I've seen it in this city and I've seen it with clients. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to build this thing, build it and they will come. Um, have you looked into what else is already built?
Yes.
Like, are you building stuff because you want it to be like, this is one of those tough inner questions because you want it to be yours.
Mhm.
Or are you actually building it for the reasons that you truly say a community needs to exist? And that's why we get a lot of these things with nonprofits who are competing, who, we're looking for
Yeah.
funding, we're looking for these types of connections. Are you building it because you want to spearhead something for your ego? Asking myself this too,
Yeah.
right? Or are you actually building it because there is a need? And that's a really interesting question to ask with businesses and also with, like I said, nonprofits, community groups, education groups. These are the things that you have to look at. Creative Mornings was established, and I'm not saying that, but I'm not expecting Creative Mornings to be an answer for everybody. Not
Yeah.
expecting the business to be an answer for everybody. Where is it that I have these gifts and my stances and how I can help serve in this capacity? And can I meet people where they already are? Or do I have to build something completely new? When you call people in as opposed to call them out, this is something that, Ashley Williams does really well with the Well Collective. I've learned that from her. I've definitely overstepped in, especially after that reckoning. I was thinking about this when we were talking about gun violence and guns in schools. Immediately it was like, oh, we should be having a rally. We should do all of these other things because I did feel so passionately about it. And then I was like,
Yeah.
guess what? There's a lot of communities there. Maybe I need to join that community instead of starting something else myself.
And this leads to a new part of this conversation because I think in the entrepreneurship space, small business space, we often talk about ourselves as leading communities. And in some contexts, that's true. But I think we also need to talk about the importance of joining other communities and not trying to always be
Yeah.
the leader of everything. Because, like with Creative Mornings, you were a part of an existing organization, you were the host, but it wasn't your organization only benefiting your business. It was part of something that's an international organization.
Right.
Um, and I think that's a really interesting thing to consider because a lot of times I'm seeing a lot of small business owners feeling like they have to build a community and hold the community all on their own, but they actually could just participate and be in community with other people.
Right. And I think that this is another thing that when we're thinking about businesses or even
Mhm.
things that we want to do to help, we could look at it from a standpoint of that again, that 3 layers, 5 layers deeper than what we're looking at. What is the true reasoning behind
Yeah.
why we're doing this? What are these values? What am I attached to? And where can I contribute, but maybe not have to? I mean, come on, we're all high achievers, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is the problem. And also the amazing thing about this community. I know you and I sometimes we're in the same room on different events, and we're like looking around and going, "Oh yeah, I don't know, see any other high achievers in here. These people who are like pushing and doing and all of the things, and truly remarkable leaders, correct? And you don't always have to be the one that's leading it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of hard sometimes when that's your MO and that's kind of your instinct is I have to be the one in charge of all the things.
Yeah.
But
That's the
I feel like
programming.
yeah, it is the programming. And I think this is part of like, you hear a lot right now, like we all want to have the village. Where's the village? But part of that is you have to be a villager. You have to be in community with folks. And I think that's sometimes hard for us small business owners who want to be in charge all the time. You have to
Yeah,
take a back seat and not try to run everything
right.
to participate and be a part of something bigger than just you. And the magic that happens then is so incredible when you're willing to put your ego to the side for a little bit.
I think that sometimes that safety and security idea of I don't do it myself, I'm not going to get taken care of. It's really hard to be
Yeah.
a member of
Mm.
community and not just be a leader of community. And this is what I see in a lot of businesses that I've worked with as well.
Yeah.
People who are, trying to stake a claim for their own security. Not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not discouraging anybody from doing this. What I am saying is that you also have to look at it from a place of, I love your analogy about like, if you want a village, you have to also be a villager. And we are also thinking about the leading of it, that pretty soon it becomes Jenga and it's top heavy. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's a collapse because there isn't anything actually supporting that building.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about all of these different elements that go into surrounding yourself with community and being a part of community. We started the whole conversation talking about being more authentic and allowing yourself to be more you and not
Yes.
putting on the mask, not
Right.
playing a character.
Right.
I'm curious as somebody who is so involved in so many different communities, do you ever feel worried that it's risky or like you're too much when you show up in these communities? Tell me a
Oh,
little
hell
bit
no.
about
But probably because probably because of my own work, right? My
yeah.
own internal work. Sure. I used to feel that way a lot. 100%. Especially when I was navigating being a leader in corporate and being an executive. I think there was a lot of this is if I'm not this way, do I fit in? And, do I worry about being too much? Now I don't care. Then it might not be for me if that's the case. I think that there's that fine line, and I think that this is a lot of the same people. A lot of the people who come to me to try to find their voice and use their voice, or they're afraid to use their voice. It's because of kind of internal conditioning, right?
Yeah.
We were told that that wasn't allowed, whether it was upbringing through parents, whether it was teachers, whether it was being silenced in a community, whatever it is, right? So that's internal work. Um, so the short answer is no, I absolutely don't feel that now, but it's because of a lot of different internal things that
A
I
lot
have
of the work.
done. And the stories that we tell ourselves are sometimes the most detrimental. They can be the most empowering, but it can also be the most detrimental. And so really systematically undoing those, like I work with clients all the time in my coaching practice to help them undo that, whether that's through,
Mhm.
targeted hypnosis, or whether that's through, different exercises that we do together and practices that we notice together. Um, because that is a big fear, but I don't have it anymore.
It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. This is part of all of our journey here. If you are feeling like you're going to be too much or be too different showing up in these different spaces, it does take a lot of practice with being okay with that, you know, discomfort of not knowing or fear that might be showing up for you and being visible as yourself. I think that
I think that
if you
everybody thinks that immediately you're just gonna get over it. How you get over it is tiny practice. Tiny
exact
practices. And it's practice for the rest of your life. I'm not saying I'll never feel like that again. I'm not saying that there won't be something that I walk into and I'm like, nope, I can't do this." I can't say that there are some times when I am, think that I'm going to be extrovert Michelle and I'm really introvert Michelle, that
you're like,
I
I'm done
walk
for the day.
into. I can't, I mean, I walked into an event and once I remember telling you this, it's like, I can't people today. I don't know why I'm here. And
Yeah.
then really going, it's time for me to go, right? And that's
Yeah.
okay too. But learning yourself is going to help give you the compass to navigate that.
Yeah. You're gonna have to rumble with the discomfort all the time on this journey. And I think it takes, like we said, it takes a lot of courage to be yourself all the time and not have that fear. When you are navigating through communities or through your work and building all these relationships, I think one of the things I hear from women entrepreneurs a lot is they hate the word networking because
Mm,
it feels so transactional. And again, that I feel like that's a very fear-based place where they're being told this is how it should be. This is how networking should look. Pass out your business cards, just to have a stack on the table that you never look at again. Can you share a little bit about, if you were to think about how do you actually build those genuine relationships? I think people need a little bit of insight into what it really looks like because it doesn't come naturally for a lot of folks. Even though it looks so natural when you walk through the room and are just talking to everybody, I know that you weren't, like, born out of the womb doing that.
no. Actually, two quick things. Number one, I write about this a lot on my blog and on my
Yeah.
weekly newsletter. So I talk about like connecting and doing it
Mhm.
authentically a lot. Secondly, I have, because I was thinking particularly about this article I wrote about I'm a terrible networker and how like I go to an event and I don't even bring business cards anymore because I don't want anybody. Yeah, I just don't. Sometimes
Yeah.
I have them and good for me if I do. And if I don't, that's fine too. I think that one of the ways that I look at having authentic connection with people is really curiosity.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of wants to talk about themselves a little bit, even if they don't want to talk about themselves a little bit. So asking questions and learning about the other humans in the room. I know a lot of people. I've met a lot of people. I know a lot of faces, and sometimes I forget the names. And it's okay to not be perfect, right? So I don't do typical networking events. I look for people I'm interested in and I ask them questions. And that's typically the best way to start to navigate that room. Um, Funny story is that I think about back to my freshman year in high school. I joined theater class. And at the beginning, I couldn't even stand up in front of anybody or get two sentences out because I would just turn red. And then the class realized that. And they'd be like, oh, Michelle's turning red. Michelle's turning red. Michelle's turning red. And then I would just turn red just thinking about it. And by the end of the year, I didn't turn red because it just kept getting up there. So, when you're thinking about these networking events, don't go in to collect cards. This is not a game. This is not,
Yeah.
go in to collect stories. And, even if you're just meeting one person who like you feel some sort of spark of connection with, that can make all the difference in what it is in your business, but also in your life. I mean, that's really what it's for. Why are you hanging out with people that you might not have anything at all to talk about? Like that makes for a really lame business and life.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things, again, when we make business more human, when we focus on building real relationships, it's such a shift from all the tips and tricks and hacks about having your elevator pitch and your business card ready to go. And I think the other piece I want to really add in there is that nothing happens overnight.
Mm,
If you want to build relationships, like you have to keep showing up. You
yep.
can't show up to one community or one event and then be like, well, I didn't meet anybody. That was a waste. I mean, how many years were you even going to creative mornings before you got more involved in it? I feel like,
Well,
no,
I
never
did
mind.
I
Knowing
did
you,
day 1 for that one. Now, but there are other things that it took a
yeah,
very long time for it to grow.
yeah,
I will say too, when I teach my strategic networking course or when I look at some of the workshops that I give about ditch the pitch, like that's a signature course or talk that I give at organizations and at conferences and stuff like that too.
yeah,
It's, I say don't have a condition. And I was a career coach for years. And I also I taught hundreds of career coaches how to coach people.
yeah,
And the elevator pitch was always a go-to thing, but it's a connection killer. It's not a connection maker. What
correct.
makes connections? Questions. So how would you do a pitch? It's like, have you ever known somebody who, right? Like thinking about that. Like, have you ever known somebody who is supporting other people through their transitions because they don't actually know what to say when they introduce themselves? Well, that's what I do. What do you do? Like, tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about that. Like, actually leading with the questions as a hook, as opposed to like when I give you a name and a title, you're like, oh, that's nice. Crickets, right? Like
Yeah.
it drops off. So when you go into these networking events, it is an investment of your time. And it is also like, do you even want to be there? Do you want to eventually connect with somebody? If so, you have to keep going.
Yeah. And like everything in life and in business, like good things take time, they take effort, they take being intentional. And if you want to surround yourself with other folks, if you want to find your people, sometimes you just got to keep putting yourself out there until you do
Yeah.
find the right community. You might have to, go to a few that you just don't vibe with until you find the one where you're just curious enough about it, where you are
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm going to keep showing up here. I think there might be something that I'm enjoying here.
People who are successful are just people who didn't give up. And that's really the truth. People who are in business are people who didn't quit being in business.
Yeah.
People who are executives are people who didn't necessarily quit being involved and fighting toward those things that they want to, move
Yeah.
toward. Right. So that's what it is. Now, I'm not saying don't quit things that aren't aligned. Do that every day of the week. But there are other things that when you keep showing up, the results come.
Yeah, I think so many great nuggets from this conversation, Michelle, from being more you to surrounding yourself in community, being a part of a community, not always having to be the leader in order to be a part of it.
True for me.
Um, I'm curious, what is lighting you up right now about your work or your communities you're a part of? What are you most excited about right now?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I think that I'm in a period of growth through letting go.
Mhm.
So, like I am also in my own liminal space of transitions, but what I am emerging into is really, I think the thing that is lighting me up the most is working with people who are also finding that next step. So working with coaching, working on some of the witchy things that are coming, and especially for next year for 2026, I've got I've got a class coming out and a community group through like witchy practices that I'm excited about. I'm writing again, like for me, not just for clients, which is
Yeah.
beautiful and lovely, and finding my own creative spark again. I think that's also what's lighting me up. Um, we can spend all of our time doing business and work and all of that. We could spend all our time avoiding that and doing
Yeah.
vacationing, but it's nice when they kind of blend together, like remembering who I am
Yeah.
without having some of the attachments to some of the roles that I've held recently.
For any listeners who are wanting to either build a more authentic community or be a part of a more authentic community, what is one powerful action they can take.
Oh, I mean, if you're join your local creative mornings, definitely. And also, I think that I know that's the one action, but I write a lot about communities on my email newsletter called The Message. So subscribe to The Message. If you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe. I'm always trying to call different people in to think about things differently and highlight different ways to approach things. So that would be for me. If you
Yeah.
want to connect with me, that's the way to do it. And also look up and see where your local creative mornings is.
I
Attend
will add
mine even. There's
I will
virtual.
add links to everything in the show notes for everyone. Y'all, Michelle has an incredible newsletter that goes out on Friday mornings, and I always look forward to reading it because she always makes you think about something from a different angle, a different perspective. And it always pushes me a little bit just outside of that little comfort zone, which
Yeah.
we all need to have done regularly. So I appreciate that you are that person for me in my inbox, but also in my life. So as we wrap up, Michelle, people can find you online at michellemercurio.com. They can
Mhm.
still come to check out Creative Mornings Richmond because you will still be a part of
Oh, yeah.
that. Anywhere else you want people to connect with you?
I think that's primarily it. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Michelle Mercurio, and then Mishmerk on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for jumping on with me today. It was so much fun to chat
Thank
and
you
just
so much
let this
for
conversation go everywhere it went.
Yes, thank you so much for having me and also for helping guide and lead me into repeating all of the things that I get to do in my business and clarifying it for me as well. So I appreciate you endlessly.
Oh, thank you so much, friend.